Ni. Mogoče bom jaz vsem kar na začetku, medtem ko se še prijavljajo ljudje, malo kontekst prikazala, povedala, zakaj se danes srečujemo. Najprej lep pozdrav iz Inštituta Republike Slovenije za socialno varstvo. Dogodek bom danes povezovala Viktorija Pečnikar-Oblak, sodelavka na inštitutu. Pripravili smo prvi spletni seminar ob kosilu, tako smo prevedli boljši izraz, ki se boljše zveni v angleščini, lunchtime session, ki ga kolega Nic Crosby, ki bo danes naš govorec, že izvaja, oziroma ga je večkrat izvedel v preteklosti. S tem bomo tudi nadaljevali v prihodnjih mesecih, vse do poletja, pa potem spet jeseni, tako da bomo veseli, če nas boste spremljali. Tematika se dotika deinstitucionalizacije, projekt, ki poteka v okviru inštituta. Lahko se tudi redno prijavite na naše novice. Na spletni strani deinstitucionalizacije imamo obrazec, kjer se lahko na novice naročite, pa tudi na vse te spletne dogodke. Kako nam kaže? Gremo lahko že?
Ja, kar nadaljuj.
Super. Danes smo torej na prvem spletnem seminarju ob kosilu. Izraz small supports je še eden prijeten angleški izraz, ki ga je bilo veliko težje prevesti v slovenščino. Rekli smo, da so to majhne podporne organizacije, da gre za ta način dela, pristop. Boste potem v same vsebine lažje razbrali, zakaj se tako imenuje. Torej, dobrodošli. Kot sem omenila, bomo tudi vnaprej še nekaj takih spletnih kratkih webinarjev izvedli. Ta dogodek se snema in bo kasneje tudi na spletni strani inštituta oziroma deinstitucionalizacije objavljen, tako da si ga boste lahko večkrat ogledali. Imamo tudi tolmačko, ki simultano prevaja. Zato se lahko vsi, ki morda ne razumete angleščine, prijavite na kanal. Spodaj imate v opravilni vrstici ikono v obliki globusa, kjer piše interpretation, in imate 3 možnosti, na kakšen način lahko danes ta spletni seminar poslušate. Če ne spremenite ničesar, potem boste poslušali pogovor v angleščini med menoj in Nicom Crosbyjem. Lahko pa kliknete na kanal za slovenščino, kjer boste simultano poslušali prevajanje v angleščino. Če zberete kanal za angleščino, pa boste vse poslušali v angleškem jeziku. Upam, da vam bo uspelo in da bo ta kratek seminar čim bolj učinkovit. Sedaj pa še nekaj o Nicu. Začela bom z angleščino. Nic Crosby currently leads the development of personalized intensive support for people in the most complex life situations in the United Kingdom. He has many years of experience in providing user-centered support based on personal planning and individual funding. He also has practical experience in working with adults as well as in early intervention for children and young people in complex life situations. I would like now to give my mic to Nic and ask him to tell us what he has today on small supports.
Okay, thanks, Victoria. Really glad to be here with everybody. I spent quite a few years working alongside people at the Institute, and it's nice to see 1 or 2 familiar faces and familiar names. I'm going to share the screen now. because I've got some slides to talk through. I'm really happy to take questions. I know Victoria and Ida and others will be watching the chat, and please feed those questions in as we go. Me talking for an hour is probably quite boring. It's much more fun if we've got a conversation and having questions and answers and a discussion about things, particularly of the things that you don't understand. So I'm going to share the screen and hopefully everything will work just as it should. And we're off. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about small supports today. I'll explain a bit about what small supports are, but they're a very key part of when you're coming to close down an institution and or moving people out to live in the community. And this is particularly around people with really complicated support needs. So I work alongside people with intellectual disabilities, autistic people, and most of those people all have mental health support needs of some sort. Some of them have done things in the past that haven't been really good, and they've had to be sectioned, admitted to a psychiatric ward for some time. But this is all about giving them a chance to move out and recognizing their human rights alongside our human rights to live ordinary lives in the community. So I'll just get this right. Victoria pinched a load of things off this slide or spoke to you about what I do and who I am when I'm working in England. My main job at the moment is around small supports. I'm also part of the steering group that's overseeing some of the work around deinstitutionalization in Slovenia. I put a link up here to a report from EASPD, which I was part of a number of years ago, because there's an example in that report that covers the closure of Lennox Castle in Scotland. I'll come back to that in a minute, but if people do want to read, there are different language versions of this available from the EASPD website. And if you just look on the EASPD is the European Association of Support Providers for persons with disabilities. And there's a link on the slides. You're very welcome to share these slides after the presentation. I thought it was useful just to give you a brief idea about what we're doing in England and about deinstitutionalization or closing down the long stay institutions in England at the moment. In 2012, there was about 4,000 people still living in institutions. Most of those were psychiatric wards. So secure settings, much like your locked wards in some of the institutions, and all the psychiatric wards that you have. This was 4,000 people with intellectual disabilities and autistic people. There's a much bigger population of people with mental health support needs, but this is predominantly the work that I'm covering. In 2012, there was a TV documentary called Winterbourne View. There's a link on the slides there. You'll see Winterbourne View. They sent a journalist in undercover as a member of staff, and he filmed quite some atrocious and horrendous examples of abuse of the people in the institution at Winterbourne View. This was shown on national TV and caused an outcry. And out of that outcry, not only were 6 of the staff at Winterbourne View sentenced to terms in jail because of the abuse that they'd been meting out to some of the people living there, but there was a national programme called Transforming Care set up in 2014. There's a link there to Transforming Care, which gives you some background. The push in Transforming Care is to close final institutions and to move 4,000 people out. 12 years later, in 2024, last year, there's still 2,000 people living in those institutions. Some of them have been there for a very long time, 20, 25, 30 years. And the job that I've got and what I'm going to talk about with small supports is a key part of giving them the support that they need in the community to live lives outside like the rest of us. So the ongoing challenge for us is getting the right support, getting the right housing, and it's about making sure that support stays with people. the links on the side there is Winterbourne View, transforming care, and building the right support. Building the right support is the current government agenda to move people out. So I thought I mentioned at the beginning about Lennox Castle in that report. So the roots of small support organisations come with the closure of Lennox Castle. You can see a photograph there of what it looks like now. It's falling down. I put a map up just so you can see where it is in the UK. It's up there in about halfway up Scotland. It's just outside the city of Glasgow. Lennox Castle was one of 9 local long-stay institutions in Scotland. They started closing back in the 1990s. When they were closing these institutions, there was a number of people who had really individual and complicated support needs. Huey on the side there was one of them. And there wasn't the support in the community to provide Huey and the others with what they needed so they could live outside the hospital. They set up a new organisation. It was a small support organisation. The first one was called Inclusion Glasgow. The second one was called Sea Change, and Sea Change work with us now. So you can hear more about Huey's story if you click on the link. There's a link to him on a TV programme actually talking about what it was like. He moved in there when he was 3 years old. He's now been out of the institution for over 20 years. When he moved out, he was had round-the-clock intensive support. He now doesn't see support most of the week. He lives in his own home. He lives with his girlfriend, and he gets support, or his support worker pops in for about an hour every week just to have a cup of tea and make sure he's doing really well. So that's the outcome of really good support, is that he doesn't need the support that he needed when he moved out the hospital. It gives you a bit of a history in terms of this is how long these small support organisations have been going on for. What is a small support organisation? It's supporting people with the most complicated support needs, I'm guessing. All of them have traumatic life histories, especially early life. I used to plan with people in institutions to help them get out. And a first step in planning with them was actually to hear their life story. And their life story was always very difficult to listen to because early life for those people had been very difficult. They're often abused. They're all discriminated against because of their autism or their intellectual disability, and they'd had a very traumatic early start to their life. They'd been moved into institutions because they found the world a really difficult place to live. And small supports is about actually giving them the support they need to have a much better life and recover from the experience of being in an institution. Institutions abuse and cause trauma in people's lives, and I'm yet to meet an institution that does anything other than that. I think for small support organisations, what is it? It's the core is the person. So small support organisations only support about 20, 25 people. They won't get any bigger. Their core is all about what works for that person. So you start with a life story, you start hearing about what their loved ones say about them, you start to build a picture of who they are and how they need life to be. And then then you start to think about how do we give this person the right support. So I put connection down. Connection is all about giving people the chance to build relationships with the people that support them. So they don't recruit people based on you can do a certain number of hours a week. They recruit people because the people that they want to place or support this person all share the same interest. I crack a joke about they all support the right football team. You know, in my world, they all have to support Newcastle United. I'm not sure how many of you know Newcastle, but it's the best team in the world. Other things that go on is it might be fishing. If you're going to support if somebody really loves fishing, it's really good to share the support that the people supporting that person also like fishing. So you can sit on the riverbank and catch fish together. I remember working with a young man who loved swimming. None of his support team could swim. So how's that right? That doesn't make any sense. So it's all about building connection between those supporting that person and the person. And you don't do that by saying, I'm on shift this time of the week. You do that by saying, let's go fishing, or let's go to the fairground, or let's spin some discs, or let's go and watch the football. You do it by sharing hobbies, interests, passions, because relationships are what are most important here. People who've been in institutions for a long time will often find the outside world really difficult place to live. They can have really difficult behaviors. They can be quite challenging to support at times. If relationships are really strong between the person and those who are supporting them, then that will help get through those difficult days. Small supports organisations would say, we never walk away from anybody. So it doesn't matter how difficult it will get, that small support organisation will always stand by that person. And that's really, really important. And the only way they can do that is having really strong relationships between everybody in the organisation, and in particular with the person they're supporting. So it's a real investment on relationships. I mean, I think for me, that one word, relationships, is what it's all about. Especially when you think of the experience that people have had in institutions where staff have changed, where people come on shift and go off shift, where the person has no control over who's supporting them. Those sorts of things aren't going to make for a very healthy experience of institutions, of relationships. So small supports say, actually, relationships are the most important thing in this person's life, and that's what's going to help them get to the point where they can have a better life. Everybody lives in a home of their own, so it's supported living. The home is owned separately by somebody else. It can be a private tenancy, it could be social housing, but the person is living in that house, and then they have the support provided by the small support organisation. That means the person can stay in the house but sack the small support organisation. That doesn't happen very often, but it means they have control over who's supporting them, and that's really important that they have that element of control. The two words up there that I put some in bold is a relentless focus on the person, and there's no compromise. So that no compromise is of real importance. It's especially when you're supporting somebody who's had a very difficult life, it's no compromise on what works for that person. So small supports organisations would say the moment they're asked to compromise, often by the municipality or the local authority, is the moment they'll start to fail. So they won't compromise on what works. Small support organisations, only small numbers of people, very flat management structure, everybody knows each other, and a very clear commitment to staying small. This is quite a busy graphic, but it tells you the roots of what happens and what it means to be supported by a small support organisation. So I'll work over, I think you can probably see my cursor. So this is small support organisations are there to support the person. The first thing is, it's the person's life. It's not the organisation's life. So this isn't about what works for the organisation. This is about doing what works for the person. It's the person's future, and it's their dreams. It's not the dreams of the organisation or anybody else. It's all about what works for the person. It's the person's plan, and it's the person's plan because it's in their words, it's their story, it's their life. It's about what works for them. It's not just about the small support organisation. It's about thinking about all the other people involved in that person's life and having them a chance to have an input into that plan, but it will always remain that person's plan. It's the person's personal budget. Now, I know that you have legislation around personal budgets in Slovenia, although they're not used a great deal, but the ethics behind Slovenian personal budgets and UK personal budgets is the same. It's an allocation of funding that belongs to that person, and it's for that person to make decisions with support about how that money is used to get the support that they need to live a good life. But it's the person's budget. It's not the organisation's budget. It's the person's support. So it's down to, that's like the matching. So it's about fishing. It's about who they like to be supported by, who they need to be supported by. Some people might need an all-male support group, and that's fine. That's what we put in place. Some people might need a young woman who's been supported, might really appreciate having some young women in the group, and an older woman as well, who's a bit of a mother figure. That's great. That works. And if that works for the person, then that's what we do. It's all what you can see, though, all throughout this. It's all about the person being in charge. It's their life, it's their support, it's their funding, it's their plan. And the way that small supports work is that's how they do that. So if they support 20 people, they have 20 personal budgets. And each budget supports that person in the life that they need to live and the support that they need to have. I'm going to try, hopefully, we tested this, to share a little story from Mark. I'm going to play this video. Mark is supported by an organisation that we've helped set up, a new small support in the city of Leeds, which is in Yorkshire in England. And Mark will tell you a little bit about what it means to him. The little bit of background is Mark had been in an institution for 20 years. He moved out about a year and a half ago now. So this is going to mean changing screens and hopefully working really smoothly. This one. And we go up and we press play.
But when Nic Crosby started working for me, I was still in hospital, so they've helped me move from hospital back into the community, which has helped me a great deal.
Mark had been in hospital for over 20 years, so it was really clear that there was a need to think differently and to look at a really bespoke and individual model of support that would benefit Mark. So that's where we identified unique support solutions.
Part of our strategy was to build a relationship very early doors. And we would talk about what his hopes and desires were. We talked about people that were important in his life, the location of where he lived. So we gathered all of that detail to know him really, really well. We said to Mark, we can't make a guarantee that nothing will go wrong. There will inevitably be bumps in the road. But what we can guarantee you is that we will be here, we will be by your side, we will listen, we will support you, we'll make sure we know what you want and your direction of travel, and we'll fix those things, we'll iron out those bumps in the road.
It's really important to support people as individually and as person-centred as possible. This gave Mark a real opportunity for a successful discharge. This approach will benefit other individuals like Mark who are finding the future quite daunting due to such a length of stay in hospital.
Nic Crosby has helped me surpass a lot of things that I didn't think I would have done when I was in hospital. I have staff who are willing to work with me and do numerous activities. I enjoy doing a bit of gardening, woodworking, magnet fishing, and spending time with family and my friends. Nic Crosby has helped me achieve the goals that I've been aiming for, and also has had a big impact on my life. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for them.
So that's a little excerpt from a video that Mark shared. Apart from a lot of us finding out what magnet fishing is, I know that there's a number of his team started to magnet fish as well as Mark. I'm pulling all sorts of things out the canals in Yorkshire. I hope that gives you a little idea about what it means for somebody to be supported in this way. It's helped Mark turn his life around. Alongside that, on the slides, there's a small supports library. If people want to have a chance to hear stories of what it means for, I think it's about 7 or 8 other people now, they can click on the link in the slides and hear from people directly. There's some video, there's some audio. It's much like a library. You take a book off a shelf and you can have a read of the story. So there's a whole load of people talking about what it means. And every one of them, it means slightly different, but they all say the kind of same thing, that this has changed my life. One of the things for me that I really know is going back to Huey. I met Huey a couple of years ago. I interviewed him And then I heard Mark's video, and both Mark and Huey are saying very similar things about this changed my life. This is what I want to be doing. I'm doing what I want to, what I've always dreamt of been doing. And it's really striking that Huey was supported first time 20 years ago in this way. Mark was supported this time last year. But they're all saying the same thing about the support they've received. So for me, I'm really passionate about small supports because I think that that's the way that we're going to give people the support they need to live independently in the community. I talk a lot about living independently in the community because we're very big supporters of Article 19 in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Article 19 is the right to live independently and to be included in the community. And there's 3 sections to it. One is I have a home of my choice. The second one is I have support of my choice. And the third one is I am able to get out and about and be included in the local community. It's very, very simple, but it's a really good framework to always think about when you're giving people support. These are just some quotes. We did some work alongside other people up in Leeds more recently. And this is kind of I guess what people said. I think often people expect people to be coming back and talking about going on holiday or doing really big things. But what you'll note from what people have said is they're really ordinary things. The top one in the corner there says, nothing is locked, just the front door, and I have my own key. No one is saying no, it's my space, it's more independent. I think having my own key for my own home is such a simple thing, but it's such an important thing, particularly to people who've been locked away from society, not in their own home. This one here says, my neighbours are really nice. I introduce myself. People keep themselves to themselves, just how I like it, quiet. People have a life that's it's all about what works for them. And if they need a quiet life, they can have a quiet life, and that's cool. Down the side, there's some more clicks to different research that we've done on how small supports work. I think one of the key things is that we've been trying to make the argument with local municipalities about investing in small supports. And we're saying that actually, if you invest locally in small organisations, then there's a big win because that money goes into the local economy. In England, we have a number of very big providers, some of them providing support to thousands of people. But what happens there is you've got a great big management structure, and a lot of the money that is invested in somebody's life goes into that management structure, and it never sees the local economy. So we're very strong on bespoke, which is person-centered, local and small support organisations. I put this slide in because we've just done some research, and it gives you a really strong picture of thinking more, not only about the support to the person, but the impacts more widely on their life and what that means for local services. In England, we have to justify everything by cost. There's not a great deal of money in our public sector, in our social care or social welfare services. There's not a great deal of money in health. So if we're going to do something new, then we have to be very clear about what's the benefit financially, as much as it is what's the benefit to the person. So we looked at work in Plymouth. I know there's people on the call, Victoria included, who've met the team down at Beyond Limits. Beyond Limits have been going for over 10 years, and they support people with really very individual support needs and very complicated and often difficult, challenging support needs. And they're, as a whole, they do an amazing job by the people they support. But what we did was we did a kind of more formal piece of research into how this organisation works. We looked at what it means for people. So people shared their stories about how their life used to be and what it's like now. So you can see the change. We looked at their well-being. So we used an international set of scores called the Wellbe scores to actually look at the difference in their well-being before they were supported by Beyond Limits and after or now. And we found a radical increase in that. and then we put an economic value on that. And why do we do that? Well, because if somebody's well and happier in their life, they're not going to be using things like the GP or the doctor. They're not going to be going into hospital. They're not going to be needing so much time from social services. They're not going to be needing so much time from mental health services. They're not going to be needing so much time from maybe the police or the ambulance even. And all of those are savings. So we showed that increasing people's well-being, or as Doreen would say, doing the right thing by people, which is because it's really simple, actually it makes a massive financial saving to the local system. Across 9 people, that's about £700,000 sterling, which is probably not far off about €800,000 a year. We also looked at the fact that in the past, many of these people have had what we would call incidents. So they've needed multi-agency, multidisciplinary teams support. That's regularly included the police and the ambulance services. And we looked at what happened now. They're supported by Beyond Limits. The number of incidents has radically decreased. So for one young man, he was having about 156 incidents a year. That's 3 times a week the police and the ambulance were being called out. He's now having 3 a year. And so that's a huge decrease. There's one of Doreen's favourite stories as a young man who used to have a lot of seizures when he was in the institution that he was in, and they were very severe very severe seizures that were threatening his life. Since he's been supported with Beyond Limits, and this is the last 4 years, he's not had a single seizure. And that's not down to medication, because his medication is radically decreased. It's down to the fact that he's not in that traumatic, stressy environment of the institution. He's in his own home with his own support, and he's in control of how he lives his life. Now, that's great for the young man, but there's a massive saving to the wider system. And I think it's really important that we aren't shy about thinking about the financial impact of getting the support right for people, because it's a really important part of saying this is why small supports are so important. So in this case, across this group of people, there's nearly £1 million being saved every year by lack of incidents needing multi-agency support. The support to the 8 people or the 9 people in this survey is also a lot cheaper than it used to be when they were in hospital. So financially, this evidence that we've got within this report is making a really clear case that actually this is the way that you need to be thinking about supporting people in the future. That's the end of my slides.